Meanwhile, it is known that the corona investigator, Dr. Reiner Füllmich, has been sentenced to 3 years and 9 months in prison. Because the verdict was announced so unexpectedly quickly, I was unable to publish the proceedings of the 52nd day of the trial before the verdict. However, from my perspective as a court reporter, it is not only the outcome that is decisive, but above all the complete documentation of this process. The 52nd day of the trial, the day before the verdict was announced on 24/4/25, is also available to you as a contemporary document. While the defendant accused the court of judicial misconduct and therefore announced a criminal complaint, the court countered with the accusation of abuse of law, also due to irrelevant and rather offensive statements, as well as excessively long pleadings. Since the verdict is delivered in the name of the people, our court reports primarily featured the spectators present on site, who were mostly donors, especially since their motivations were not considered in this trial, even though the money for the investigative work came from them. Is this your first time here in court?
Exactly, yes. This is our first time here, and let's see what's going on. And, of course, we always hope for an acquittal, but if it comes...
Have you followed the investigative work of the Corona Committee?
Yes, always, as much as possible.
Have you also donated yourself?
Donated? Yes, yes. I expect good words from Reiner, that he will inform us all a bit again about what's going on. And I don't think there will be a verdict today.
What convinces you that Reiner is innocent for me?
Everything. Well, there is nothing. Everything that was already known before, but which is now coming out more and more. So there is not a single reason, some kind of offense or infidelity or something to accuse.
I believe that Reiner Füllmich is innocent because I have attended several trial days. And among other things, a witness testified that he was present at the time when it was about these funds and what was to be done with them. And Reiner Füllmich explained that he wanted to invest it in real estate and gold, initially to protect it from state access, and that it was planned from the beginning to only park it there temporarily. A witness testified to that. Subsequently, the lawyer said he would like to have it recorded in the minutes. And the court said, no, we will not record that in the minutes. And that was, for me, the most revealing moment in this whole process. Apart from the fact that it is unsurpassable in absurdity anyway.
In your opinion, who was the recipient of the donations? Gifts?
Yes, he was the recipient because he initiated it as, indeed, the initiator of the Corona Committee. And he did his work, ultimately. That means, in the end, I believe, if anyone were to be upset about the money not being there anymore, which is not the case, as it is still there and can be refunded, it would be the donors, many small donors. But those who are now appearing as co-plaintiffs, or rather as main plaintiffs, are the state, which has no business in this matter because it involves private funds. And those who want the money as co-plaintiffs are lawyers who actually just want to get their hands on it.
Yes. I hope I have the strength to endure it all, because it really affects me deeply, I must say. And I hope that finally, yes, that the acquittal finally comes. I just wanted to get a personal impression of how things are going here. I always followed it online, and now I've come from Berlin.
So you still believe in an acquittal?
I don't know what to believe. I think they would have to admit that they made mistakes, and it's probably about the ego, more than ever. Wait.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I actually and truly believe that deeply in my heart, because I personally know Reiner for myself. So I once had the honor of meeting him and being able to hug him. And yes, I would say the frequency is such that so much sincerity, honesty is very authentic. For me, it is very authentic, tangibly authentic. I have absolutely no doubts about it. On the contrary, it touches me very deeply that one can meet such a...
people.
Yes. Oh, come in. Yes. Anyway, if an hour later because someone is leaving.
So a little feedback on the first interruption. Well, let's put it this way. It doesn't surprise me because this motion or this regulation that he is only allowed to speak until tomorrow at 12 o'clock. It was foreseeable in the short time where He has already received, I believe, 18 warnings that the judge would want to intervene quite quickly. I just noticed that by reading out all the points very nicely, what he actually didn't want to make public, namely what Reiner mentioned for me or the defense, is now coming to the public even more. That's something, of course, whether he thought about it, I don't know. But he could have let Reiner continue speaking and hope that not everything that went wrong during the Corona times would be highlighted so precisely. With evidence, with mention, PCR test was not suitable, and so on. He listed all of that. In the end, I find it brilliant, and I just hope that the defense uses all legal means now to prevent the interruption of his final statement.
Mr. Bittel, perhaps your feedback on the decision announced by the chairman?
Yes, to be honest, I'm a bit shocked because I really thought the final statement was something sacred, that the defendant could really express himself as he wishes. That doesn't seem to be the case. If I understood correctly now and the audience confirmed it, it ends tomorrow at 12:24. And that is, of course, legally, it's something else. And now I'm really curious to see how the lawyers, the legal team, will consult and decide what can be done. And I'm also surprised, I didn't know that either. Schindler decided that and not the chamber. And now there's, of course, a complaint and the chamber will decide on that. And I'm also curious to see how the boss, for example, will view this. Let's see.
Thank you very much. How do you assess the chairman's decision and the accusation that the public is being influenced here and that the chamber is being intimidated by the defendant's actions?
Yes, well, for me, it's simply a reversal or even a shift that I attribute to others, the mindset in which I am essentially operating myself. Because, as Goethe says, it is so beautiful, if I did not have the sun in my eye, I could not see it. And so it is, of course, when you recognize in the other that there is an effort to influence the public, you have to ask yourself, is he exactly in this thought pool that he too, with his negotiations, wants to influence the public? And for me, it's actually quite obvious.
The defense team, what has the consultation with your clients resulted in?
Yes, we are trying to get as far as possible now. So he will now once again address the accusation of infidelity, specifically dedicate himself to it as well. This is also what the chairperson wanted, and he has prepared a lot which he wanted to present in the coming days. If there is only time until tomorrow noon, then that will. Of course, he will have to limit himself to the most important things. But we'll see what the decision is. I have requested a chamber decision, which will probably look the same as the chairperson's decision. That's clear. But against that, one can also file a motion for bias again.
What do you say about the focus of the influencing public and the attempt to intimidate the chamber?
Well, a chamber that allows itself to be intimidated, I'd like to see that. The point is that here, which is also correct, in the context of breach of trust, because you have to consider all circumstances, not just those that are supposed to constitute the specific accusation. And that's simply not happening here. The focus is simply on the question of whether there is a loan agreement or a trust agreement. They decide on a trust agreement that no one has seen yet and no one has confirmed, except for Viviane Richter, who supposedly mentioned it in some way. And I simply see at the moment that our client is trying to present the overall context, and that is currently his task in his final statement, and I believe he is doing it quite excellently.
Above all, it didn't seem particularly intimidated. Not really. It felt like a real blow and a dressing down for the defense of the accused.
It felt more like a, well, how should I put it?
Like an attack. The prosecutor looked like, well, I don't know, very, very strict. As if I wasn't even allowed to criticize that the prosecution didn't investigate objectively for the client here, and you are definitely allowed to make that much criticism.
She didn't do that either. That can be clearly stated.
Exactly.
What is the impression?
Yes, Mr. Schindler, the chairman, issued a reprimand. He read it out at the beginning. And the defendant, Reiner Füllmich, was not impressed and then just shortened his text a bit and made some small jabs. So he presented it well. He wasn't intimidated. And I still stand by what he did. It was again about whether it is a donation or a gift or whatever, whether it is a committee and to whom the money belongs. I can only say for myself, I haven't kept track. I estimate that I have donated about 500 euros for the Corona Committee. And for me, it's a gift for Reiner Füllmich. That's how I would always state it if someone asked me. That's that.
You know that I drink Champermilch. There's no milk at all in it. These are really the things that interest people, right? There's no milk at all in it. I didn't want to drink it.
You know that I drink oat milk.
I didn't know that.
I asked if I perhaps brought a coffee.
Excuse me, can we return to the matter at hand?
No, we must have chosen a coffee. That's very important. This is about taking action here. Existential. I'm very sorry, but I can't procure any milk right now. I want that oat milk again.
I'll try it again now. How did the chamber respond to the complaint? Regarding the curtailment of the last word?
Laughed heartily once and continued.
Exactly. Yes, it's not just the Schindlers. We have all the Klopps.
You will have to justify the motion for bias by tomorrow? Yes, how will it be phrased?
Well, I requested the written version, which the chairman also handed over to me, and so I will deal with it this evening. I couldn't remember everything. Well, he made a sweeping attack. All the topics we have ever brought up, roughly speaking, are almost abusive of rights or delay the process in an unreasonable parts length. And that's why I will then deal with the individual matters. I had already mentioned a few things orally earlier regarding the Office for the Protection of the Constitution, that this comes from the colleague, defense attorney, Dr. Misery is coming. Of course, we must then assume that when a lawyer presents this in court, it corresponds to the truth. Naturally, I cannot verify this otherwise except for the colleague's statements. And what he has presented to us regarding this, and what other topics were there? Regarding the threat situation, we had a witness who also sent us a lot of screenshots and also verbally repeatedly informed us in the presence of witnesses and also sent statements to the court herself that we are being threatened from a certain side, be it through any threats of violence or through a flood of complaints or complaint tsunamis or massacres. The images spoke for themselves, I believe, which you only showed to the court in excerpts. And yes, all other things, as you mentioned earlier, the breach of trust offense requires a comprehensive summary, considering all circumstances. And of course, it is important here to also discuss the content of the work and the conviction of the accused. So it is completely absurd to treat him the same as other prisoners or offenders who, with the sole intention of harming people, establish scam platforms on the internet and rake in millions, really rip off or use grandparent scams on elderly people, etc. Exactly. So here you have at most. In the end, you have nothing here. But if they want to twist it somehow, then you have one. If only to accept one, a conditional intent or an endangerment of assets, which somehow, yes, I say, but that's how they will do it.
That's how they will twist it, so they have it. You need the trust business between him and Viviane Fischer, maybe also between the other two. And if a breach of trust has occurred there, then they have him. But that's complete nonsense. There is a loan agreement here. It's clearly stated at the top. Everyone behaves as they would with a loan. As well, Viviane Fischer takes the money and uses it privately. End of announcement. And now he's being blamed for not being able to repay because the money was, let's say, blocked from him. That can't be right. This is purely a civil law issue. It has nothing to do with criminal law, not even remotely. So, end of announcement.
Yes, I am very grateful for this interview. I thought you might already be restricting yourself and the discussions would only be about the type of coffee preparation. After the accusation from the chamber, yes, that the defense, namely trying to influence the public, but thank you very much for the sound bites.
If you tuck that sweet piece in there, you won't even notice what's inside. I will dissolve it in there, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. What has stuck with you? Any new insights?
I would say the insights are not new. It is a political process. The infidelity is neither fulfilled in the objective nor in the subjective area at all. So I also believe that this process, if it is politically instrumentalized, is actually for the public. It also shows once again how the state acts, and is not an advantage.
You still think it's a political process despite the Chamber's allegations that the public is merely being influenced here?
No, well, I am relatively convinced of that, as I am a fully qualified lawyer myself, and I know that the offense of infidelity is a very vague one, and he explained that as well, completely correctly. And it was a good lecture. So in that respect, I think the state, or those who promised themselves something by removing him from circulation, we have achieved exactly the opposite with that.
Can you say to which type of organization the donation was made?
Yes, I think it was. Donated for educational work. Here, it's not a question of whether there is an organization in the background or not. It was simply donated for that purpose. And that was actually a gratitude for receiving this education, because the state did not provide it.
The defendant also presented some chat logs today that have been included in the file between the co-partners, including Justus Hoffmann and Reiner Füllmich. And like Reiner Fischer and Reiner Füllmich, if you listened in like that, what impression did you get of the social dynamics internally?
Well, that some wanted to enrich themselves, that's clear, came across. And I also believe I followed the Corona Committee myself, at least in parts. And I can say that I only perceive these two, like Reiner Fischer and Mr. Dr. Füllmich. And I must say that this investigative work, he simply earned a divine reward. With this investigative work, he saved many people, many individuals from it, not only in Germany, but internationally. With this investigative work, from getting injected with this rather problematic substance.
Did you yourself also donate to the Corona Committee?
Yes, of course, the whole family. What was
the motivation to donate? To whom did you donate? Or did you even know to whom you were donating?
To the Corona Committee, that means Reiner Füllmich and Viviane Fischer. To no one else.
Society, then you knew nothing, or did you not have them on your radar?
I didn't know what the societal backgrounds were and what all has developed there. At the beginning, I also saw Justus Hoffmann and Antonia Fischer sitting there on the right side of the table. Maybe you can remember. Not a word, nothing at all. It's just as if they wanted to listen in as an underground, to conduct research in order to bring the whole thing here. What also surprises me at this very moment is where Martin Schwab has gone, why he isn't here. And?
Yes, Reiner Füllmich visited him in prison recently.
Did he visit?
Yes.
But he has...
At least that's what the defendant said a few days ago.
And will he still somehow speak up here, or at least in public?
The evidence has long been closed.
Yes, that's clear. But one can also be elsewhere. Word.
Unfortunately, I can't say anything about that. I don't know, maybe not. I can't say.
Okay, I'm just as puzzled as you are. I'm just wondering.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Because Antonia Richter and Justus Hauptmann are his students and doctoral candidates. And Templin is somehow also involved with the group. It seems to me as if this would have harmed everything. To put Reiner against the wall for me, so to speak, to put it against the wall, so to speak. He's standing here against the wall.
You came from Berlin. I wanted to take a look at it myself. I've been following this for a long time on the internet, especially through Roberta Bittel as well. And I've been involved with the entire Corona Committee from the beginning. And I have a rat. How do you say? I smell the rat. And then it was like popcorn cinema for me every Friday when the Corona Committee was on. And I think, of course, I didn't get vaccinated either. I also knew right away that something wasn't right. But especially through the educational work that Reiner has done, I delved even deeper into the rabbit hole and discovered many other things as well. And for that, I am so grateful to him. And I am so sorry that he who has helped so many people is now being punished like this. It's really embarrassing to watch the whole thing, honestly.
Were you able to follow that? After all, there were already 51 days of trial. Were you able to follow Reiner Füllmich's words and also what the chamber has stated?
Yes, definitely. So this whole thing, I didn't catch everything the judge said from the beginning, but you can clearly notice everywhere the words lateral thinker scene and conspiracy theory are mentioned. That's it. Of course, we know the framing that's used to silence you. And he's simply being pushed into the lateral thinker scene, and that's it. And I find what also struck me extremely is that they are all like robots there. Reiner makes his statements there, and he is not looked at by the judge. The judge stares downwards. There's something's not right. I think you can really see it. If you have a bit of intuition and insight into people, you can see everything here. It's a rigged game. And when I went in, I still had a bit of hope, thinking, well, actually, everything is on the table, the RKI protocols too, for which he is now accused. So actually, he is innocent. That's how it is. And now I think, yes, and when I heard how deeply the intelligence service is involved in this, and seeing how the judge looks, I almost get the impression that the verdict is already decided.
So you believe there is something to the accusation made by the defendant? That the intelligence service has a hand in this and that it's not just a societal dispute?
No, of course not. Reiner also presented this very well as it was read out with the file stamps. Corona. So everything that is critically associated with Corona should be pursued. And we all really need to ask ourselves now it's affecting him, but eventually it will affect us too, ultimately. The state will not stop.
Did you also donate?
Yes, I also donated.
What was your motivation for the donation?
Yes, actually, but I only donated at the beginning because I also have various other channels where I donate. For me, this educational work was more important than any movie ticket in recent years, truly.
Did you know which type of organization you were donating to?
No, not at all. I wasn't interested in that at all. It was only about the content for me.
Reiner, from your perspective now, the donations were embezzled, or was it legal for him to?
No, on the contrary, he even secured it for more. We all saw what happened in Canada with the accounts that were seized. And one of his accounts was already closed. I find it completely normal that he secured the money. He should even receive a reward for that, ultimately, and not be stuck here for a year and a half. Investigation committee. Honestly, I am so disappointed in this legal system.
Thank you very much. Ask a bit about the feedback. Any impression?
Well, it's pathetic how a person basically has to fight for their lifetime here. And it seems that, to me, they sit there like robots with stony faces. There is no empathy to be seen, nothing. I find that really terrible. It's my first time here today, but I've always followed it on the internet. And as bad as I'm experiencing it today, I couldn't have even imagined it. What's happening in this country now is unbelievable. And Mr. Füllmich, he also looks very dull. I saw him live back then at the Olympic Stadium. And there was something from the grassroots, some kind of anniversary. Back then, he still looked significantly more sinful. So you can see that it really affects him.
Can you form an opinion on whether there's any truth to the accusation of embezzlement? Do you believe it's an argument that these are loan agreements that were mutually concluded? So both Viviane Richter and he entered into loan agreements with the obligation to repay?
Well, I mean, did he own a property? So was the repayment secured and all that? And I can imagine that he wasn't serious about it. And he has done so much for people. Why should he now? As I said, these arguments are there. He has a good reputation as a lawyer. He has accomplished incredible things with his job already. And such a reputation is tarnished over a bit of money in a German matter. I can't imagine that. I have
this morning heard that this trial wouldn't even be necessary if Mrs. Reiner hadn't been taken off duty. And that's why I don't understand this whole trial. Or rather, it's just outrageous that she was removed, that Mr. John was appointed. And I wonder, where is Mrs. Reiner? Why? Can't everything be reversed? It's unbelievable. 1.5 years. I don't understand it.
Who deserves the applause now?
Actually, Reiner Füllmich. Unfortunately, we can't transport that down to the cell.
There was no applause now for the fact that the chairman has now granted the request to extend until 5:30 p.m. because unfortunately I didn't catch that. How was that received?
The extension was received very positively by the defendant, of course, because curtailing his final statement is an affront in itself. And just the fact that she conceded a little more now, which Katja Wörmer will certainly elaborate on shortly, is today's victory, I would say. Because we see that all our arguments are pretty much bouncing off. At least nothing can be discerned from the court's reactions.
Ms. Wörmer, was your client able to present any essential aspects that could mitigate the accusation of embezzlement?
Yes, well, the problem is indeed, as my colleague already mentioned, it feels like it hasn't been properly received the whole time. And that there are, of course, similar arguments that we also present in our closing statements, and also those that the defendant has repeatedly emphasized in his own closing statement and throughout the trial. But it is certainly important to emphasize this again. And it would, of course, be important for this to be heard as well. And we have now, because that was just the question, we have only achieved that instead of the closing statement ending at 12 p.m. tomorrow, the speaking time has been extended to 3 p.m. because the chairman said during the lunch break or afterwards that tomorrow it is requested to extend until 5:30 p.m. and on Friday also an extension until 5 p.m. And then, of course, the client can also be allowed to speak longer. And then Reiner Füllmich himself requested me to submit evidence requests over the weekend to be allowed to formulate them again. And this has now been initially rejected because it was said, well, there is still time this evening and tomorrow, then during the extension of the speaking time. But it might be that it will be decided differently tomorrow. He has left that a bit open for now. So he was today. He was a bit milder than usual.
So it was only 2 hours that were extended tomorrow because we always have a 1 hour lunch break. So it ends at 12, now it ends at 3 with a 1 hour lunch break in between after a 2 hour extension.
Exactly.
That was all.
I think that's everything. I'm completely confused today. It's like a storm of information, everything summarized again. In front sits a completely bored chamber. I'm just exhausted.
I wanted to thank the city. Thank you very, very much. That stabilizes the recordings, and I found that very considerate. Thanks much.
I'm very pleased.
Have a good trip. When I think about it now that they initially gave him the floor until 12 o'clock, then were willing to extend it upon request to
3 p.m., I believe, to give the final word, which means 2 more hours, because there's a 1 hour lunch break in between. I'm kind of wondering if they accept the motions for evidence afterwards, whether they will actually process them or just push them aside. Because we've noticed that with various other things, they said, yes, we are closing the proceedings, but you can still call witnesses. But then the witnesses were limited in their statements. And does that have an impact on the final word? If it's concluded and motions for evidence come afterwards, maybe it has a similar effect. I don't know.
For me, it also referred again to emails that are used as evidence for embezzlement. Did you know the contents, or were there contents that were new to you?
Well, one thing I noticed where you always refer to, where you say, yes, Viviane Richter wouldn't have known anything. That's from this July 2, from this chat on Telegram. What you don't notice is that exactly what you always quote also proves that he was willing to pay into the account, because at the same moment he offered to liquidate the gold to offset the shortfall in the account. However, he is always accused of not wanting to deposit into the account, which was incorrect at that moment. But it was astonishing, Justus Hoffmann, what he knew when he later filed the criminal complaint, contrary to his better knowledge.
So what is your impression of today's day in court? Yes, again, very informative. There is nothing new. I thought I could take him home today, that he would be acquitted. And yes, I think, yes, and what I actually want to say is thank you very, very much for the great reporting.
And I think we should not only thank you, but if everyone who gives an interview could maybe also contribute €1 or even 2, that's not too much to ask. Support you in your work. That's what I would wish for.
That's super kind. Thank you very much. I didn't expect that at all. I'll leave it in. I won't cut it out.
You can't cut out individual statements, but everything. Statements are facts. Chats, emails must be seen in context. And that was very important for me today, Reiner, to present everything in context. Again, because a single quote on which, for example, the accusations are based cannot be left as it is. And no evaluation can be drawn from it, but the evaluation only emerges in context. And that's why today was also very detailed, naturally limited by the limitation of speaking time. But I also find it important considering that the lay judges do not have access to the files, but only a reading mat. I found it very important for the lay judges to hear again how the somewhat newly found emails and chats were presented. The knowledge that the main complainant, Dr. Justus Hoffmann, had just now, this contributes to the fact that this entire accusation actually collapses. But for the defense, I found it important that certain things were highlighted again in presentation in context.
What emerged from the new emails, from your perspective?
Yes. Well, the content was that the complainants knew very well that their claim is unjustified because it always refers to the company which existed from when to when, and whether a claim at all could be generated from the company that was originally founded, a GBR. And if you then relate it to what the lawyer, Edgar Simon, said about corporate law, against this background, the accusation should actually collapse. So there was a lot of knowledge from the complainants in the background. And yet it has come to trial here.
Can you give a brief feedback? How did you perceive the day of the trial?
Today was very intense, again, as it was recently. I admire Reiner Füllmich for his strength with which he still pleads for hours or delivers his final word. Also, he doesn't let the judge interrupt him and even addresses the judge and instructs him, which I find very fitting. The judge indeed attacks that Reiner Füllmich there allegedly makes rather hurtful statements, and he says he is rightfully angry. Over 1.5 years of unjustified detention due to a financial offense, which never otherwise leads to imprisonment. He then structured it very nicely. Today, at the beginning, he spoke about the motivations of the complainants from Reiner Füllmich's perspective, that psychological problems and financial issues both play an important role in why they behaved the way they did or how they are still behaving. Then in the next part, it was again about this chat history between Reiner Füllmich and Viviane Richter in the summer of 2022, when there had already been a rift and they had already argued. And the court always refers to this chat history and wants to infer from it that it was about a sham contract agreement or something like that. And Reiner Füllmich says that this happened 1.5 years after they had concluded these loan agreements. This rift and this chat history have nothing to do with each other in terms of timing, and not causally either. It is completely illogical to construct a connection there. He very nicely dissected that again today, and with strength and power and an optimistic aura. One can only wonder how he still manages to do that after 1.5 years in prison. I can't think of anything more to add today. I am very curious about tomorrow. It's gradually moving towards the verdict now, I believe. But the final word hasn't been spoken yet. and there are still motions for evidence to come. I don't always understand everything. I'm also a legal layperson. I have no idea, but a bit of common sense. And it's like a little law study here when you sit and listen 40 times.